Sophia trudged home from school, her eyes red and puffy from crying, and slammed the front door behind her. She had just found out that every one of her classmates had been invited to Lisa's birthday party. Everyone but her. She violently threw her school bag in a corner, ignoring the meal her grandfather had prepared for her. As she walked through the door, her pet hamster Apollo greeted her with his usual enthusiasm, but Sophia couldn't return his excitement. The heavy feeling of being left out was like a weight on her chest, and she couldn't shake it off. She put on her headphones and turned the music up to maximum, trying to drown out her thoughts. She punched her pillow over and over again, releasing her anger and frustration. Apollo, who had been watching her from the corner of the room, knew that she needed space. He waited patiently for the right moment before approaching her. He could see that she was upset and wanted to comfort her in any way he could. "What's wrong, Sophia?" asked Apollo, sensing her distress. Sophia tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. She was overwhelmed by her emotions, and she couldn't find the right way to express herself. She felt angry at her classmates for not inviting her to their parties, and angry at her parents for not being home more. She felt like no one understood how she was feeling. Apollo could see that Sophia was struggling to put her feelings into words. Sophia took a deep breath and began to speak, her words coming out in a jumble. "I'm just so mad and frustrated," she said. "I feel like no one cares about me, like I don't belong, and my parents are always working and never here to talk to." Apollo watched Sophia's distress with a heavy heart, not knowing what to do to cheer her up. He tried talking to her, telling her that he understood how she felt, and that she was not alone, but Sophia just pushed him away. "Leave me alone, Apollo. You're just a stupid hamster. You can't help me," she spat. Apollo, being patient and not taking Sophia's words to heart, continued to try to comfort her, rubbing against her hand and nuzzling her arm. He climbed on her lap, trying to make her pet him and offer her a small distraction from her sadness. Despite Apollo's efforts to cheer her up, Sophia remained sad and withdrawn. Apollo, seeing that his efforts were not working and wanting to do more, decided to take matters into his own hands. He climbed back into his corner. While she was at school, he prepared the spacecraft for long-distance space travel. He was determined to take her to visit Pluto. He remembered that visiting Pluto always cheered him up when he felt lonely, and he hoped it would have the same effect on Sophia. A few moments later, he emerged with a small, shiny spacecraft. Sophia's eyes widened in surprise. Apollo nodded. "Yes, it's that spacecraft that I built, but improved." Apollo smiled. "I know just the place. Come on." But Sophia shook her head and replied, "I don't want to go. I just want to stay in bed." Apollo could see that she was struggling and decided to try a different approach. He knew that Sophia was curious and loved exploring new things, so he said, "I understand you're feeling sad, Sophia, but just think about all the incredible things we could discover on our journey to Pluto. We may even come across a new planet. Also, being far away from your problems and looking at things from a different perspective can sometimes be helpful." Sophia was hesitant at first, but her curiosity eventually won over, and she agreed to go on the journey with Apollo. Sophia climbed into the spacecraft, and Apollo programmed the coordinates for Pluto, the lonely dwarf planet. As they flew through space, Apollo told Sophia about Pluto's history and how it had once been considered a planet, but had been reclassified as a dwarf planet. "Pluto probably felt lonely and excluded too, just like you do," said Apollo. "But it has many other dwarf planets for company." They took off, soaring through the atmosphere and into the vast expanse of space. Sophia had been on this journey before, but this time she couldn't shake off the feeling of exclusion that had been weighing on her. As they approached Pluto, Sophia couldn't help but feel a sense of disappointment. She looked out the window at the tiny planet, compared to the grandeur of the other planets she knew, like Saturn with its fancy rings or Uranus with its beautiful colors. Pluto seemed small and unremarkable. She thought about how she was small and insignificant, just like Pluto, excluded by her classmates and left out of the group. As they landed on Pluto's surface, Sophia looked out of the spacecraft windows. The cold, barren landscape only reinforced the feeling of insignificance. She was looking at the frozen terrain, but it all felt unimportant and uninteresting to her. She thought that if only she were bigger, more interesting or more important, like Saturn or Uranus, perhaps she would not have been excluded by her friends. Apollo, wanting to cheer her up, suggested that they take a walk outside to explore the planet. Sophia reluctantly agreed, and they both stepped out of the spacecraft. As they stepped out of the spacecraft, Apollo and Sophia were immediately struck by the difference in gravity compared to what they were used to on Earth. The gravity on Pluto is only about 6.5% of the gravity on Earth, making it feel almost weightless, Apollo explained to Sophia. Sophia listened with wonder. "Wow, that's only 1/15 of the gravity on Earth," she exclaimed. "I feel like a feather." Apollo smiled and nodded, happy to share his knowledge with Sophia. "It's quite different from when we visited the moon. The gravity there is about 17% of Earth's gravity, which made it feel like we were walking on a bouncy surface," Apollo added. As Apollo explained the difference in gravity between Pluto, the Earth, and the moon, Sophia was surprised. "Wow, I had no idea that the gravity on Pluto was even less than the moon," Sophia said. The cold was intense as well, and both Apollo and Sophia could feel the cold biting through their special spacesuits. Pluto is incredibly cold. The temperatures can drop as low as -229 degrees Celsius or -380 degrees Fahrenheit, Apollo explained. This is due to several factors, such as its distance from the sun and its lack of an atmosphere to trap heat. These conditions make Pluto one of the coldest places in our solar system. They walked around, taking in the strange and otherworldly environment, the dim blue light, and the barren landscape. As they walked, they both noticed that the sun looked incredibly small from here, and the light was dim, casting an eerie blue glow on the landscape. It was a stark contrast to the bright, warm light they were used to on Earth. They both realized that they were standing on a completely different world, with its own unique characteristics and properties. Apollo, noticing Sophia's lack of enthusiasm, decided to try a different approach. He told her about the 5 moons of Pluto: Charon, Styx, Nix, Kerberos, and Hydra, each one with its own unique characteristics. He explained how they were close to the planet and how they were captured by Pluto's gravity. He also told her about how Charon is the largest and closest to Pluto, being half the size of Pluto and being only 19,000 kilometers away from its surface. He also pointed out how Nix and Hydra were highly reflective, making them appear bright in the sky, and how Styx and Kerberos were much darker, making them harder to spot. He hoped that by highlighting the uniqueness and proximity of the moons, Sophia would begin to see the beauty in her own uniqueness. Sophia noticed that it was snowing on Pluto. She looked up and saw small flakes of snow falling from the sky. She turned to Apollo, surprised, and asked, "It's snowing? I thought it was too cold for snow here." Apollo smiled and explained that the snow on Pluto was different from the snow on Earth. He told her that on Earth, snow is made of frozen water droplets, but on Pluto, the snow is made of frozen nitrogen, methane, and carbon monoxide. It's a unique type of snow, something that is not found on Earth. He also mentioned that even though the temperature on Pluto is extremely cold, scientists have found evidence of an underground ocean of liquid water beneath the ice, and where there is water, there could also be a possibility of life. Sophia's curiosity was sparked at the possibility of life on Pluto. She couldn't believe that such a small and cold planet could potentially harbor life. She looked at Apollo with a determined look and said, "We have to find out. Let's explore and see if there is actually life on Pluto." Apollo smiled and replied, "I knew you would say that. Let's go." And with that, the two set off to explore the vast and unknown expanse of Pluto. Sophia's imagination was running wild as she thought about how to get down to the underground ocean on Pluto. "I wonder if we could use our special tools on our spacesuits to dig through the ice," she thought to herself. "Or maybe we could turn on the superblast from the spaceship and melt the ice that way." Her excitement grew with each idea she thought of. She was dying to find out if there was any life on Pluto and couldn't wait to be a part of such a big discovery. She became increasingly excited at the thought of discovering life on Pluto. As she talked through her ideas, Apollo began to worry that they might not be able to find their way back to the spacecraft. He tried to gently interrupt Sophia, but she was so focused on her plans that she didn't notice. Sophia let her imagination run wild, imagining strange, otherworldly creatures lurking beneath the icy surface of Pluto. "I wonder what kind of aliens live down there, in that subterranean ocean," she said to Apollo. "Do you think they have tentacles or multiple eyes? Maybe they're made of ice, like the snow falling around us." She wondered what they would think of her and Apollo, a little human and a tiny hamster in bulky spacesuits, trespassing on their world. Would they be friendly or hostile, intelligent or primal? The possibilities were endless. She was both excited and a little scared at the thought of making contact with alien life for the first time. Apollo hesitantly approached Sophia. "Sophia, I need to tell you something. I'm sorry I didn't say anything earlier, but I didn't want to interrupt your excitement about finding life on Pluto. But we're lost. We need to find our way back to the ship immediately, otherwise we'll run out of oxygen." Sophia's face fell as she realized the gravity of the situation. "What do you mean we're lost? How could we be lost? We didn't leave any footprints behind," she exclaimed, her frustration and fear growing. "I don't know how we'll find our way back, but we need to try," Apollo said, his voice filled with concern. He could see the fear in Sophia's eyes as she looked around at the barren landscape, feeling the weight of their predicament. They had to find a way back to the ship quickly before it was too late. "I'm sorry, Apollo. I should have thought more before walking around like that. I was just so curious about the possibility of finding new life," Sophia said with guilt in her voice. "It's okay, Sophia. I understand. Your curiosity is what makes you such a great explorer. Let's just make sure we're more careful from now on," he said. Apollo's face lit up with excitement as he had an idea. "Sophia, I think I know how we can find our way back. We can use the stars to navigate," he exclaimed. "The sun and the North Star are both fixed points in the sky, and if we can locate them, we can use them to figure out our position. I'm so happy that I thought of this." Sophia's expression brightened as well. Apollo pulled out a small device from his pocket. "It's a star chart," and he started studying it intently. He pointed to the sky, showing Sophia the sun and the North Star. "We landed on the side of Pluto facing away from the sun, so we need to head in the opposite direction," Sophia noted. Apollo then started walking, using the stars as a guide. He checked the device again and again, making sure they're on the right track. Sophia followed behind, feeling a mix of hope and anxiety. The landscape started to look familiar. Sophia recognized a rock formation they've passed earlier, and she started to feel a glimmer of hope. Apollo's navigation was working. They were getting closer. But then, they heard a strange noise coming from the distance. They both stop and look at each other, wondering what it could be. They realize that it's their ship. The noise is the sound of the engines. They ran towards the sound and finally, they saw their ship in the distance. They both cried out in relief and happiness, and they hugged each other tightly. They made it back to the ship just in time. Sophia apologized again, but Apollo reassured her that it was all part of the adventure. Sophia thought to herself as they walked, "Maybe it's best if we don't find any life on Pluto. They might prefer to stay hidden, undisturbed. I don't want to intrude on their lives and make them feel scared." She then paused, reflecting on her own feelings of loneliness. Being alone and feeling lonely are two different things, she realized. These potential alien life forms might be alone, but they might not feel lonely. They might have their own families and communities, just like I have mine. She also realizes that being alone can be okay sometimes, but if she feels lonely and excluded, she should communicate to the people that make her feel that way. She made a mental note to talk to her parents and friends about how she's been feeling. She knew that it might not be easy, but she also knew that it was important to be honest and true to herself. She turns to Apollo and says, "Thank you for understanding, Apollo, and thank you for helping me navigate back. I've learned a lot on this journey, and I'm grateful for it. I'm also sorry for what I said before, Apollo. I was hurt and angry, but that was no excuse to take it out on you. You've always been a good friend to me, and I'm grateful for that as well. Apollo smiled and forgave her, and they continued on their journey back to the spacecraft. As Sophia and Apollo were about to leave Pluto, Sophia noticed a small, sparkling crystal on the ground. She picked it up, admiring its unique shape and the way it caught the light. She knew that it would make the perfect present for her parents, something to show them that she had been thinking of them, and that she was grateful for all they did for her. On the way back to Earth, as she drifted off to sleep, her mind couldn't stop racing. She thought about all the feelings she had experienced before, feeling left out by her friends, and feeling like her parents didn't understand her. She thought about Pluto, how far away it was from the rest of the planets and how small it seemed compared to the others. She thought about Apollo, how small and seemingly insignificant he was, but how important and kind he had been to her. Sophia fell asleep, her mind still processing the events of the day. When she woke up, she wasn't sure if the journey to Pluto had been real or just a dream. She looked around, expecting to see the barren landscape of Pluto, but all she saw was her own bedroom. She felt a moment of doubt, wondering if it had all been a dream, but then she noticed the crystal on her nightstand. She picked it up, examining it closely, and knew that the journey had been real. The next morning, just before her parents had to leave for work, they opened the letterbox and found a colorful letter with flowers on it for Sophia. "It's from Lisa," her mother said with a smile. Sophia's heart jumped with excitement as she recognized her friend's handwriting. She quickly took the letter and opened it to find an invitation to Lisa's birthday party. Sophia felt a wave of relief and happiness wash over her as she read the invitation. She had been worried that her friends had forgotten about her, but this invitation proved otherwise. Her mother noticed her daughter's expression and said, "I think the post-delivery service had been on strike yesterday. That's probably why it got delayed." Sophia nodded, still feeling happy and grateful for the invitation. Sophia was giggling and brought the crystal to her parents, telling them excitedly about where it came from. "Look what I got from Pluto!" she exclaimed. Her parents were surprised and a little skeptical, but they didn't want to dampen her enthusiasm. They smiled as well and said, "Wow, that's a beautiful crystal, honey. Where did you get it? From school?" Sophia smiled, knowing that her parents might not believe her, but it was okay. She knew the truth, and that was what mattered. They were happy and touched by her present, and that's what matters the most.